We're going to start with a question just to get your sense on some Puget Sound politics. Then we're going to have some questions that are open-ended that allow you to be creative. However, with those questions, we ask you to be as specific as possible so that we can compare you to your running mates. Broad generalizations that you're going to probe the environment won't impress us. We need specifics on what kind of policies you plan to implement, what measures you would vote for, which ones you wouldn't. So to get started, we want a sense of whether or not you supported the Parks Levy and whether or not you supported the 2008 Sound Transit Proposition 1.
Yes and yes.
And our first kind of open-ended question has to do with the head tax, eliminating that, whether you support it, whether you're for it, if so, why or why not?
I support eliminating the head tax, absolutely. I think it sends the wrong message, even if it's a small amount, to tax an employer when they're adding headcount. I support funding for transit, but I think we can find better ways to fund transit than disincenting people from hiring. It's not the amount of money, I think it's the added paperwork, the kind of pain in the ass. I mean, I've talked to a lot of small business owners over the course of the last 4 months, and they're really up in arms about two things. One of them is the head tax, and the other one is the square footage tax. And I think we need to make sure that we create an environment that is conducive to good locally owned small businesses doing well.
So the head tax is what's being proposed, being eliminated. The measure's not addressing the square footage tax. How would you make up that funding? How much time do you think that imposes on the business? Why do you think that's a big imposition? Where would you put that imposition otherwise? Are you going to put it on homeowners? How are you going to make up that funding difference?
I personally would like to see it on automobiles. I mean, I think we're not talking about a huge amount of money here, so it's not as if it wouldn't be as onerous as the monorail tax was, for example. I mean, I think in that case, one of the mistakes was having it be just on automobiles and not a little bit broader. I mean, I had no car at that point. I was living on Capitol Hill trying to have a zero carbon footprint. But I would have been happy to pay my share for the monorail and would gladly have done it, but I wasn't ever asked. But in this case, I think it makes sense for if we want to build a different sort of transit infrastructure that will work for the future. I think it makes sense to tax the things we're trying to disincent, and I think we are trying to disincent the use of automobiles. So.
And how specifically do you have a proposal to tax automobiles? Are you talking about parking or like what kind of mechanism?
I haven't put forth a proposal to tax them yet, but I would be more in favor of something like a tab tax, where it's directly on the card side.
I know there's one legal mechanism is a transportation benefit district. That's one thing that I think someone in another race for another position has discussed, and Nick Licata mentioned it in an interview, and then we've seen some discussion at the regional level about how to possibly create a county-wide transportation benefit district, and that would allow the government that creates it to establish a $20 vehicle fee, and if the government went to put the issue to the voters, it could be, I believe it's as high as a $100 vehicle fee. There are other potential taxes and levies that could go along with that. So does that sound like it's something we're increasingly hearing about? Does that sound like what you're talking about?
That sounds like exactly what I'm talking about, yeah.
Okay. Give us a sense of how you would prioritize the transportation budget. If you could draw a pie chart, where would you change the percentages? What areas need the increases? What areas need decreases? Where would your priorities be?
So I expect that if I win, you guys will be one of my strongest partners, because my entire platform looks very much like your key principles and what you're fighting for. So, and it's not because I copied it from website. It's because
We wish other
it's
communities.
because it's the smart thing to do, and it shows that you guys are engaged and concerned about the future. We have got to be making our investments in transit. There is a huge, and when I say transit, I mean mostly rail-based transit, rapid, reliable, frequent service, where you know where the stops are. They're not going to change. Relying on like bus rapid transit rather than building a rail line out to West Seattle, for example. It's a great solution in the short term, but over the longer term, buses aren't a solution unless we can figure out a different way to power them. If we can build electric lines everywhere and get the electric buses across the West Seattle Bridge, maybe that's an acceptable way to go about it, but we're not going to have gasoline at $3 or $4 a gallon for very much longer. I mean, we are seeing the last of those days. I really think that writing is on the wall. There's a limited number of dinosaurs out there, and there's a lot of people. So
And the dinosaurs aren't coming
we need
back.
to not
To
fast
build more
enough.
fuel.
Yeah. So we need to build transportation infrastructure that will allow us to move people and goods and services around without having to rely on carbon essentially to do it.
Can I ask a follow-up question there? You mentioned alternative ways of providing bus transportation, and we have lots of electrical lines already for trolley bus systems. And last year, the Washington State Department of Transportation worked with Metro and developed a rapid trolley network plan that would have been a component of a viaduct replacement that didn't include a tunnel or an elevated new highway. It found something like it would increase ridership by 30 to 40,000 people, and it was pretty economical.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound like something that you would support if there were a proposal in front of you on the city council?
I would support. I'm more in favor of building actual rail lines, and here's why. Because I think as we plan out what the city's going to look like for the future, and we want to make sure that we're connecting our urban villages and the urban centers to each other with rail lines, so that businesses and developers and all of the people that are going to help us build the city we want to live in know that when they make that investment, there's going to be a return on. Bankers know when they go to give the businessman a loan that there's going to be enough foot traffic there in perpetuity because that stop is on a rail line. So I think for the backbone of our infrastructure system, it's important to have rail. Now I think there is a very significant place for non-rail bus transit, of course, circulator routes that get people from where they live down to transit stations and that sort of thing. Something like providing alternative ways to get around while, this is something that concerns me since I live in West Seattle, while the viaduct is being constructed. I think that would be another great use for that. And to the extent that we can do it with electrified buses, then absolutely, that would be the way to go.